We all have the uniform on.
Yeah, we have. Well,
dude, no, literally, we all have. We're black, blue, black.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, are we ready?
Pick this up at rickbeato.com in the merch store.
Yeah, but I'm selling black T-shirts, $20 for a Hanes black T-shirt. Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. This is Dave Honorato. This is Red Shull, and welcome to Guitar Trash. No, welcome to our second installment of what is going on with these guitar companies. Today we're going to be talking about Fender guitars. We talked about Gibson a couple weeks ago. Talking about Fender today. Okay, what's the deal? Rhett just put out a video yesterday, or 2 days ago.
Yeah, 2 days ago. So there's kind of a weird thing happening between PRS and Fender right now. As some of you may know, a few years ago, John Mayer left his longtime endorsement with Fender and moved to PRS. The first collaboration they did was a guitar called the Super Eagle, this crazy hollow body PRS that retailed for like $11,500. Now they're selling secondhand for close to $20. So if you got one of those, good job.
Good if you can get it.
Yeah, good if you can get it. Now the second one that they just released is called the Silver Sky, and it has caused a bit of a controversy in the online guitar community because it's basically a Strat with a PRS headstock on it. There's a few more differences than that, but for all intents and purposes, it's a PRS Strat. So took them over 2 years to develop it, countless prototypes, and there's been some leaked images that have come out of John playing it on stage and stuff, but this week is the first week we got a real good look at it. And so
it's a bolt-on, right?
It's a bolt neck, 3 single coil, 5-way switch, traditional Strat body shape. I mean, it's a PRS Strat.
It's a Strat with a PRS neck.
Yeah, and so basically I made a video about how the online guitar community is reacting to it. That guitar is seriously ugly and seems like nothing special. Go jump on an actual cork sniffer, children. What does that even mean? So why is it when PRS makes a Strat, it generates so much hate online? I mean, the Stratocaster is one of, if not the most copied guitar design of all time. Think of all the brands that currently build a Strat style guitar that you could go out and buy brand new. So yeah, that's basically what's going on right now with PRS and Fender. Oh, and they did, I'll drop the ad in here, but they made a parody ad called the Roasted Earth. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Where they took a PRS Custom 24 body and put an upside down Fender Strat neck on it, called it the Roasted Earth.
That's some serious trolling right
That's
there.
some serious trolling.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, what's going on with Fender over the last 20 years or so? Why is John Mayer trashing Fender?
Well, I'm not exactly sure why he decided to jump ship. So, I mean, he's said a few times publicly that it wasn't the same company that he started with when he first started with his guitars, which is quite possible because, I mean, with a big company, you know, everything changes every 6 months typically with people. So, I would say probably the biggest thing that I've known in the last 20 years with Fender, much like Gibson, I think they've just come out with too many models. And they're not, to me, there's too many models that are close to each other that there's not enough differences between the lines. Like, for me, it's like, if I look at like the Road Worn series Mexican stuff, you know, you look at one of those and they're like $1,000 new. You play one of those and then you go play like a typical, what I'll consider a lower end custom shop, maybe something in the $4,000 or $5,000 range. There's not $3,000 worth of difference that I can tell.
Unless you own one, of course.
Well, right, you know, and believe me, I'm not saying that the custom shop stuff is not great. I've had a bunch of it and it is, but for me, you know, there better be a pretty big difference for that kind of money.
Okay,
you know?
This is a Mexican telly here. This is a American Standard telly. Now, obviously, they had different pickups, but this one plays pretty well, and it actually sounds pretty good. But the difference in price,
is quite a bit. I mean, you're you know, even between the American Standard and the regular Mexican stuff. You know, there's a lot of money difference there, and the problem is those bodies and necks are being made in the same plant. So, you know, like I said, kind of go back to the thing. They got too many models. I think if they really just should cut it down to where there's like, you know, obviously have your Chinese stuff, your Mexican stuff, the Japan-made stuff, which I'm a real big fan of. And then of course your American Standard and then the high end American stuff. And I think at this point of the game, you can only redo a Strat, a Tele, a Jazz Master so many times.
Yeah.
So we're to the point now where it's almost kind of like, well, like as I said with Gibson before, just concentrating on making the standard model the best you can make it. And obviously have options, but to me, it's one of those things where I think they're concentrating on trying just to cover so many bases, and it's like, man, you don't need to do that. Really.
Well, another thing about Fender is that you also have things that are you have the Fender Jazz bass, the P bass. You have basses. We were talking about amplifiers as well.
Course, yeah.
I mean, Fender is more diverse than Gibson.
Yes.
Because they go into different instruments.
Yeah, totally.
Remember when they did the sound system in that Volkswagen a few years ago, like 10 years ago, where if you bought like a Jetta, you got a Fender branded Volkswagen. It came with a guitar that you could like plug into the back and run your guitar or your car as an amp essentially through the sound system. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another problem with them too is, and I see this with PRS as well, is there's too many signature models. Like there's so many Fender endorsed artists that now granted there's some cool ones out there like
they're actually the opposite of Gibson, where Gibson doesn't really do signature models.
Yeah, I mean Gibson has
everybody. My aunt has a Fender signature model. She doesn't even play guitar.
Right, and it's kind of just like you're splitting hairs here. Now, with the exception of the new, I think it's the Ed O'Brien Strat that they just came out with that has the sustainer pickup and everything in it. Like that's pretty hip in my opinion.
Right.
That's something that's really different and it's fairly priced. I think it's right around $1,000.
Yeah.
And it's cool, it's unique, it does something different. But you start getting into all these different, like the Brad Paisley Telly that just came out, and then all of the Mayer stuff, which I have one here. This is where'd it go? My Mayer Strat here, which I bought it secondhand, and had it for 5 or 6 years, and it's great, but it's really closely related to the Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat. The neck is often SRV, and the tuners are often SRV, and so it's like there's just so much stuff to choose from that.
What is the difference between that and an SRV?
Honestly, the difference is the pickups, and this has a right-handed bridge on it.
Yeah,
right.
That one is a little bit more of a C-shaped feel neck, where the Stevie Ray is a D shape.
Right.
But it's the same radius, same frets, same
Still no
gears.
skunk stripe on the back.
Right. So basically, it's very similar. Yeah.
And that's because Mayer's talked about, his first cherished guitar that he saved up for and bought was an SRV.
Yeah. Right.
Signature, and so it makes sense that this is what he would go for. But I think there's so much to choose from Fender. It's like, what am I getting into?
Yeah, and the thing is, and now there's so many other companies that have made S and T style guitars and bolt-on neck stuff that Fender. They came up with the guitar originally, so that needs to be there. I mean, they've done a good job of keeping it that way, but they really just, to me, it's like, man, just make the best one you possibly can for your average musician. Like have a price point of $1,500, American made, and it's the best, the best Strat we possibly can make for that kind of money.
Yeah.
Which I think they do an okay job of. But the Mexican stuff, to me, I'll play some of that stuff, and it's like, man, well, this is like $500-600. And then, the American Standard and the rest of the stuff is $2,000-ish, and I'm like, man, there's not $1,000 worth of difference.
Well, just like we were talking earlier about the Japanese guitars, too.
Oh, yeah. I love the Japanese stuff. In fact, that's, if I was going to buy a new Fender, personally, I would buy the Japanese stuff because they're closer in detail to the original stuff. Their fit and finish is excellent. I mean, they do thin finishes, which I really like. And even the American series now, they're doing a thin finish, and I think it's probably partly because they already have a line of guitars that they're doing that overseas, and a lot of the Japanese stuff they don't sell in the States.
Right.
Which leads me to believe they think that those guitars are good enough that they're going to cut into their new stuff so much here that they don't import them over here typically. So you have to go online and buy them either eBay or Reverb or that kind of thing.
Pro tip.
Right. Yeah.
Pro tip. Well, I have a Japanese Telly, a Mexican Telly, and an American Standard Telly, and the Japanese Telly is excellent. I can't find it. It's here somewhere.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Lost it.
I can't find it, but it is here somewhere. I was looking around for it.
Somebody came in and stole it. They figured out that was the best one. Okay.
I think Gretsch is the same way. We talked about this in the Gibson video, but Gretsch is also owned by Fender, and pretty much everything that is Gretsch except for their custom shop is Japanese made, right?
Although I think Gretsch is actually not owned by Fender. Isn't it just distributed by Fender?
I think it's owned by Fender.
Is it?
I think it's owned, but don't hold me to that one. They've done some stuff recently, so I don't know what's going on exactly with that. But either way, Fender's definitely involved with them for sure. Yeah, they're and they, like you said, the Japanese stuff is pretty much their whole line.
Well, and the Japanese stuff too has always been good. I mean, I have the first like parts caster guitar that I ever did. I bought a beat to crap old Japanese Strat, like an '83. And refinished it and put it back together, but that guitar is amazing, So, and that's another thing to talk about too, is like the parts caster world. So,
that's huge.
It's part of the reason, honestly, I think that Fender is sort of kind of losing their footing, and we can talk about this in a little bit too, but what they've done with big box stores like Guitar Center, but the parts caster world, especially with the online guitar market, I can go on Warmoth or All Parts or a number of any online manufacturers that are making bodies and necks and pick guards and bridges where for around maybe 60 to 70% of the price as a new top of the line, either custom shop or American standard, I can build my own signature Fender. And as long as I've got good parts and somebody knows how to set it up and put it together, like, dude, why would I go?
Yeah,
I build these all the time.
I've built probably close to 50, 60 Warmoth body, neck, strats, tellies kind of thing. And I have yet to have one that the tolerances, like the necks and the bodies, didn't fit together perfectly. All of them turned out to be great guitars, and for pretty much under $1,200 for the whole thing.
Okay, so Dave, why would somebody go out? There's all these Fender parts guitars that are made, that whether you're talking about the Andersons or the I mean, so many companies make these. Nash, they make these copies or their own Sir. Why would you pay all that money for a guitar like that? Tell me about that. What is your opinion on that?
Well, as far as like the Andersons, Sir type stuff, those guitars are very different than the regular Fender stuff. They're completely hand built by a small company. If you've ever played any of those guitars, all of those guitars have impeccable fretwork.
Oh yeah, I had an Anderson. It was amazing. I had a telly. It was great.
I mean they're right out of the box. Yeah. I can tell you, I've never picked up an Anderson or a Sir out of the box that wasn't already just it's dead on.
Yeah.
So that for one, to me that's what you're paying for in those guitars. It's like the PRS kind of thing. It's like you're guaranteed you open that case and you're not gonna be like, well, the nut needs to be messed with. The frets are a little bit weird. This is it. No, it's the way it should be. That's what, to me, if I'm paying that kind of money, I want a guitar that, I don't have to, it's right out of the box, plays killer, sounds killer, and I can go play it 300 gigs and not worry about anything.
Well, with Sir especially, the thing that Sir has nailed is they've taken that traditional Fender design and they've brought it into the 21st century. I mean, their design, it's a lot of subtle design differences, but the way the neck fits in the body and the way the bridges are designed, it's a modern guitar that has modern playability, modern reliability. And then on the other side of that, you have companies like LSL out in LA who are building, and Danocaster up in Nashville, who are building incredibly accurate recreations of what Fender did in the pre-CBS era, like pre-64, 65, A friend of mine, one of the best bass players I know, just a couple years ago bought an LSL P bass that's based on a 63.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who has an actual 63, and they compared them, and for all intents and purposes, they were probably 95% the same. Now, obviously, you're talking about wood that's been aged for 50 years versus not, but as far as the specs,
talking about a new instrument, though.
A new instrument with new reliability, with something that's in the $2,000 range versus $20,000 for something. So something that you can gig, something you tour with. You're not super worried about taking it out. It's not an investment piece per se. So that's the thing for me personally. I've had a couple Fenders. I have one now, and what kind of keeps me from going back to Fender is the fact that, okay, cool, I could spend I mean, what's an American Standard cost now? Like a Strat, like in the 1800 range?
I think they're like if you get a discount, probably
1500.
So for that money, I could go to a company like LSL or Mario Martin or one of these boutique manufacturers and get something that is as close to a vintage, 62 Strat as I could get.
And they have the the problems worked out because a lot of those guys know the issues and go, well, we can fix that. I mean, so to me, that's where if you're going to spend money, that's where you're getting the difference, and not that Fender couldn't do that, because I mean some of their high-end custom shop stuff, I've played, was excellent. I can honestly say though, I've yet to play one that I was really floored by and just like, man, this is, but I can name numerous Andersons and other ones that I've played are like, man, this is killer. So, I think, like I said, there's they've come up with the three iconic models. So what they need to just do is just focus on really making those the best they possibly can and stop worrying about having 15 models of one thing.
Right.
And just, as all of these companies, bring it back down to smaller size.
Yeah.
For me as a guitar player, I like dealing with small companies because it's that whether it's true or not, it's that fact in your back of the head. Wow, there's only like 10 guys making this guitar, so they're really concentrating on making the best that they can.
But they've also, this company, as opposed to Gibson, makes a lot of these low-end amplifiers. They have the modeling stuff, and they have their Squire line, which is is kind of akin to the Epiphone line of Gibson. I think because of this, they're different than some of these other companies. Because they're involved in more things.
I agree.
So.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about with Gibson, where it's like you're spreading your resources too thin, with Gibson trying to buy all these electronics companies and become the new Nike. I mean, Fender makes PAs. They make sound systems for cars. They make the, cheap modeling amps. They do, and then they're also still doing the high-end boutique hand-wired stuff. And it's like, I think everyone's just getting a little too diffused, and you're right. If you just kind of narrow the focus a little bit, give me a budget working musician line, give me a really nice recreation of what the premium Fender stuff was from its whole history, and then give me an extremely high-end custom shop where I can go and order, I want a blue and gold sparkle Strat with a Tele pickup setup, and I want a big, this headstock and all this kind of stuff. I think you get those three things going, and
they can still undercut these boutique companies because they can make these a lot cheaper.
A lot cheaper because they have the way to do it. Between the CNC machines and all. I mean, here's a perfect example. Okay, like there's a Pro Junior amp back here. Okay.
Right.
Now the Pro Junior and the Blues Junior amps. Okay. Talk about getting something and they did it right.
Yeah.
For next to no money.
Right.
I know they can do it. Because how many people, I've owned 20 of these amps, okay?
Great.
And phenomenal. And you can do little tweaks to them, they're great. This is what I'm talking about. Like, come out with models like this to where that's your base, you improve it, and they've actually improved these like 3 or 4 times now since they've been debuted them.
Yeah.
And they're still the best selling amp in history for, Hot Rod Deluxes, those, and the Blues Juniors. Those, everybody across the board were like, man, for $300 to $500, $600, this thing sounds great. It looks cool. It works great, and I'm not breaking the bank buying it. Right. So I know that if they can do it with the amps, they can definitely do it with the guitars, and they have done it with the Mexican stuff. But to me, they need to just focus more, especially on the American stuff. I think because the American standard guitars are fine and they're great, and I've owned a bunch of those too and worked on thousands of them. But there's not enough difference between the higher end Mexican and then the American standard stuff to justify almost.
But why is that though, Dave? Is it just because the guitars are really simple? They're.
Yeah, I think so. And I think.
As opposed to a Gibson, the way that they're assembled.
Yeah, it's a different. Yeah, they're a lot less to make the bolt on that guitar. It's a lot easier to do.
You don't have the variance in price though that Gibson does either.
No,
that
not as much. I don't think.
No, I mean the lower. When you buy a Les Paul,
studio or something is that's $1,200, and then right above that, everything is $5,000
Right.
basically, $35,000 to $5,000 or more. But like I said, I know Fender can do. If they could do this with the amps, they could definitely do it with the guitars, and they have done it to the guitars to a point. But to me, I still think they need just to cut it down and make it a little more like like where you walk in and you basically pick up a Mexican Strat or Tele and go, man, for $1,000, there's nothing else I could find in this price range that'll come near it. The one thing I've never understood about Fender with their parts is like, here's a perfect example. They've got all these people who endorse everything about Fender, all these Fender guitars. There's very little signature pickups. Like you would think, okay, well, how many people play Strats? Okay, we'll offer, like Robin Trower has a Strat. Everybody, John Mayer. I want the John Mayer picks. I want the.
They do. So these are the Big Dipper pickups, which are the Mayer pickups. But you're right. Other than these and the Texas Specials, which are the SRV,
which is just the standard stuff.
I don't know. I mean, they do these. They do the SRV, the Texas Specials. They do a 50s, a 60s, which is like the Hendrix kind of thing.
Right.
But that's the thing. It's like, dude, you have these iconic players that have embraced your brand. Like Hendrix is known as the Strat guy, so put out like a Hendrix.
I mean, they and they did like the Voodoo Strats and that kind of thing. But even guys lesser, icon guys. I mean, everybody's played a Strat, and there's plenty of people that they could have, especially bass guys. I mean, to me, I know so many bass players. They're like, I like Fender basses, but the first thing I have to do is chuck all the electronics out and the pickups because I don't like them.
Yeah.
Man, well, okay, they're right in itself.
That's a big thing with the Fender basses.
And so to me, that's like, okay, well, there's something you can really improve on without a whole lot more R&D and development. It's like, okay, take on some bass guys, have them come in and say, well, this is what I don't like about it. You should do this, this, this. And they have done that to kind of a point on some of the American Standard model P basses. They put some active stuff in those and a 3-band EQ, and then they have like a Geddy Lee bass and some of those that obviously are, Marcus Miller and some of that stuff. But all the guys that I know that are weekend warrior guys that are playing 4 or 5 nights a week are playing regular standard P basses and jazz basses, and they all have Bartolinis or they have EMGs. They never have Fender pickups in their basses. Rarely, very rarely. So to me, that's a perfect example of like, okay, well, then guys need to really come out with some pickups that are, for the basses.
Just go back to whatever was in Jamerson's P bass and make that the standard.
Well, they've tried that, and they get kind of close sometimes, but then sometimes not. And it's so, but I think, basses are obviously a little different than guitars just sonically, but but to me that's like that is a big thing that I've installed way more pickups in Fender basses than I ever have.
You've installed them in my Fender basses.
Yeah, right. It's like the first thing I get a bass, man, because what most bass guys do, they'll go, man, this bass rings really great, but it sounds like crap.
Yeah.
So they go, well, I know it's going to sound good because it rings right. I just got to get some electronics in it, and then once they do, it's like, oh, I love it.
Yeah. Well, you're about to do the same thing in my P bass. Yeah. I've got a standard P bass that just.
So talking about some of the positive things about Fender guitars, when I pick up my Telecaster, I know it's going to play in tune for the most part, always.
Yep.
And the amount of times that I have to have it set up, I think I've brought it to you a couple times. And I can go years without a setup.
Yeah, no, they're rock solid.
They're rock solid.
I mean, if anybody asks me, I need an all-around guitar that I can pretty much do anything on, I hand them a Tele.
I think it's the best.
I mean,
all-purpose.
Leo, he nailed it the first time around, man. He really did, And as much as they've improved it and added on to it, my go-to guitar, time and time again, is always a Tele.
Yeah.
And whether, with different pickups or whatever, but that body shape and that neck, you can drop that thing down the stairs, basically.
I have.
And you can finish the gig,
Let's do it right now.
Right, yeah. and so, perfect example of just, a great design. And very simple, but it works, So, and yes, could it have some improvements? Yes, of course. And I think that's
dude. And the thing too is like, where would we be musically speaking without these two instruments?
Yeah, right.
You know what I
I
mean?
mean, I can tell you right now, I've owned 2 original 48, 49 broadcasters. Okay, in my life, which was years ago. And those guitars, basically, if you take one of those guitars and pick up your standard 52 reissue Tele, okay, they're very, very close for the most part, they're still very, very close, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Because that just means that, wow, he really did nail it the first time around. As far as like the improvements that, I think there's only so many things you can do, but like you said, the scale length right off the bat, man, those things stay in tune great. There's a reason they stay in tune really well.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's kind of like they still make a great guitar. That's a great guitar.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. You walk in and some of them feel a little plastic and a little stale, and I think that could be worked upon for sure.
And that's just kind of narrowed down to one line in the whole thing, because you're even like the Squier Affinity series.
Oh, great,
dude!
Great guitar
for $300, $400, like.
Dude, I can. There's only two things you got to do to that guitar to make it gig worthy. You mess around with the nut a little bit because the nuts are not really cut that great, and pretty much the gears are a little suspect.
And here's the thing: if anybody out there is kind of poo-pooing the Squier name, go look up Jack Pearson, who is one of the baddest guitar players in Nashville. I mean, he's played with the Allman Brothers. He's got an iconic career, and. I was on the Blues Cruise with him last year, the Joe Bonamassa Blues Cruise, and I watched him play 3 shows. He plays a stock Squier Strat. The only mod he does is he swaps out the volume pot to just the cap to a white one so he can see it better on stage. Yeah. And he has the best tone of anybody I've ever heard. And he plays a Squier into a stock twin with a tube screamer.
Right. Right, yeah. I mean, like I said, those are the vintage vibe Squiers, man. They're hard to beat. They're really hard to beat, and thus here we come back to what we kind of started with. Perfect example: $300 guitar with some mods is basically as good as the $1,500 American '62 Jazzmaster.
Right.
Basically, the Fender Japanese line for me is my favorite line for a few reasons, because the features that they do on their stuff is sort of in a traditional vein, but they take it to the nines and they do a really cool. It's like a lot of the boutique guys, take these ideas and kind of go all the way with them. Where the Japanese kind of do the same with their Fender line.
Yeah.
And like they were the ones who came out with like the original 6-string basses, reissued those, and then the American line decided to do it because they were so cool. Now they've got a Squier that they've got out, which is of the same model. They just, I don't know, they for some reason the Japanese version just seems to be cooler to me.
Yeah.
And what is it? Is there a difference in the wood that they're using?
I don't think there's a big difference in the wood in their stuff. I mean, they use the traditional stuff, a lot of alder and basswood and Indian rosewood and maple. And they do use a Japanese version of ash called Zen, which is SEN, and it's like a Japanese version of northern ash, which is a great wood. I love ash. For me, Fender, I always like the ash body stuff the best for me. And the Mexican stuff, they've done some of that too. They've done ash body tellies and some of that, and I think they even did a pine series recently too.
I'm a big fan of the pine.
Yeah, and I love pine too.
Pine telly.
And that's the original garage version of the Broadcaster. He took pine, and so. But like I said, I think Fender there's too many models, and it's just there's not enough differences in quality to justify the money difference in my mind. And I wish there was, because like the Gretches, they're nailing. Like I've played a couple of the $10,000-$12,000 White Falcons, and they're amazing guitars. And I've owned the original stuff, and I can tell you right now, they're better than the '50s originals.
Yeah.
But your average Japanese $2,000, $2,500 Gretsch is just as amazing, and you don't have to do anything to them.
You just worked on my Falcon, and that thing is rock solid. And for a guitar that could be a really temperamental guitar, a fully hollow floating bridge, like angled headstock with a Bigsby. I mean, that's honestly spelling kind of a recipe for disaster for like a gigging musician. And man, I fly with that thing. Yeah. I put it under a plane, and as a testament to your setup skills, it is as reliable as one of these tellies.
Yes, yeah. And the truss rod in those guitars is great. I've worked on a bunch of them, and I've yet to see one that the neck set wasn't done right, that the truss rod wasn't really responsive. The wood in the guitars, all of them seem to ring really well. Yeah. and I can't say that for the originals because I've owned a lot of the original vintage stuff, and they're all over the place. You might get one really nice one out of 20 original, vintage ones.
Yeah.
So to me, that of all of the line, that's the kind of thing where it's like, man, I know I can walk into any Guitar Center or wherever and pick up a midline, Japanese-made Gretsch, and basically it's going to be a killer guitar.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Another thing that I think Fender's doing well on their custom shop, and this may sound a little bit contradictory to what we were saying earlier about them having too many different lines, but one thing that I love, we just had NAMM a few weeks ago and watching all the new NAMM videos, and one of my favorite things to see every year is what the custom shop does, and Gretsch does the same thing. Their Gretsch custom shop, they are some of the most creative builders out there, and every year they come out with some really crazy, and I'm not talking about the nuts like diamond encrusted whatever, like to me that's whatever, but they find really unique ways to kind of repackage and spice up the typical Fender design with their tellies, and recently the offset guitars in the past couple of years have really gotten popular, Jazz Masters and whatnot. So I think that's a really big selling point with the custom shop is, we were talking about a minute ago with the Squires, like, well, why would I spend more than $1,000 on a guitar when I can just get a great Mexican? And that's a valid point, especially for a working musician. But I think one of the main reasons to go with something from the custom shop, in my mind, is you get something that's just super unique, a lot of vibe, really cool. I was in New York City a few weeks ago, and I went to the Guitar Center in Times Square, which was a sensory overload, to say the least. But they have a really great Fender custom shop room. They had this telly. It was like this, 70...
What, 72 or
72, yeah. And it was a huge gold flake sparkle over three-tone sunburst. And it was just like the coolest looking thing out there. Now, it was like $7,000. But if you've got that kind of coin to spend on something, it's pretty unique.
So you don't really have to be a lawyer or doctor. It's not like with these Gibsons to own these guitars. Okay, you guys, if you were to say your own personal opinion, what is the best boutique Fender style guitar made out there? What company?
In my opinion, I really like LSL. I really like K-Line. I like Sir, but the Sir design's a little too modern for my taste. It's just not my playing style.
You talking body shape?
Just the way they're set up, a lot of the features and the way they feel. I don't play well on a Sir, which is more of a testament to my play than their building. But
well, I'm torn because, as I said before, I've done a lot of Warmoth builds. And I know what I can get from Warmoth as far as quality woods.
You can build your own.
I can build a guitar that's every bit as good as any $5,000-$6,000 Fender for basically $1,200 to $1,500 by Warmoth.
Yeah.
So for one, that's one.
Yeah.
I think G&L makes some really great stuff.
Yeah.
Now haven't played some of their really super new stuff like over the last year. But
I've owned 2 G&L tellies that were excellent.
And I think if I was going to just go and if I had to buy like an American Standard style telly, I would definitely go try a G&L before I went and bought one of those because the G&Ls really are put well together. They're really built well. The neck shapes for me always tend to be really nice. They feel really comfortable. The fretwork's really well done.
Yep.
The pickups I've had liked some a lot, and then some of them I didn't. I just changed the pickups out, and they were fine. So, but I would say, like Warmoth, if I was going to build something, G&L or the Fender Japanese stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, for that price. Now, if money was no object, if I'm going to go ridiculous, like Anderson or Sura. There's there's a few other ones too, but they're not really around anymore. But anyways, I was gonna say there's a few like Schecter Valley Arts, but that's old stuff. But so I would have to say if I was gonna at least buy a new Fender, I'd go Japanese Fender.
And going back to G&L, I can't believe it's taken us this long to get into the G&L conversation because arguably it's more Fender than Fender is.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, and even since Leo's died, that company is still they've come, like I just saw one they've come out with 2 or 3 weeks ago. I saw one. They're doing a Jazzmaster style with 2 big style humbuckers in it.
I've seen that.
And non-trem, heavy-duty bridge, real simple layout, and it looks killer. And if it plays like any of the other ones, it's going to be a great guitar, I think. Yeah. And there again, G&L. What I do like about them, you can call them up and go, hey, I just want this guitar, but I want it in silver metal flake. And they're like, yeah, it's just a small upcharge, and here it is.
So it sounds like we're describing what we want Fender to be. G&L is
sort of
as a company, right?
Where G&L's a lot smaller of a company. They're much more downsized. I just think Fender,
So there are some other iconic models of Fenders. We've touched on a little bit. The Jazzmaster.
Yeah.
Then obviously back in the early 90s, you had Kurt Cobain playing the Mustangs, the Jaguars.
Duosonics.
And Duosonics. What about those kind of guitars that Fender built for years, those kind of guitars?
And they still do. They still make every one of those models. There again, the Mexican versions of the Duosonic and the Jazzmasters and Jaguars are excellent guitars. Like I said, now the Vintage Vibe Squire stuff, to me, for $300 to $400, is like, okay, you do some small mods to them, and you basically have the same guitar for $1,000 less. So I'm going to say I would probably go that route if I was going to, because you could get a Jazzmaster and a Jaguar, both in the Squire Vibe 60s Vibe series, for even less than the price of one 62 American Jazzmaster. And you do, obviously, I'm not trying to say that they're equal, because they're not. Yeah. But if you are, like most musicians, they like to tinker with stuff anyway, so they're going to change pickups, they're going to do take a
I don't like to do that, Dave.
Right,
I like to have you do that.
Well, and especially with those guitars too, arguably they're more niche guitars and more niche instruments. Like, unless that is your sound, for me, that would not be like my main guitar. It might be something I have around, like, oh, I need that sound. And with the Jazzmaster especially, that is probably the one Fender that I would defer to another builder on, specifically because of the bridge. The bridge design on a typical Jazzmaster is just, it's not great. Now there's companies that have fixed them, like Mastery, and those are basically direct drop-ins, especially if you have like a vintage 61 Jazzmaster or something where the break-over angle on the bridge is so shallow that the strings won't stay in the slots and they don't tune well, and you can't bend on them and you can't play hard on them. Companies like Mastery have kind of fixed that, but then you're getting into, especially if you own a vintage instrument, okay, well, do I want to start digging into this?
No.
And Fender, I will give it to them. They have tried to fix some of that, like they have done the Hot Rod series with the Jazzmaster with the Tune-O-Matic bridge in it, and studs, and the J Mascis has that in it, which are much better as far as the setup and stuff. But that's an easy, that is an easy mod. I mean, you can take a reissue and do that to any of those if you've got a competent repair guy. Basically, $125, and you can put any bridge on a guitar and it's fine.
Yeah.
So, but. Like I said, I gotta say for the money, and I've done. The only reason I say this is because I've done this to like 30 or 40 guitars for players in town here that have bought the vintage Squire stuff. Man, once you tweak them out and you get some parts on them, man, they're hard. You can't beat them. And here's the best thing: if it gets stolen or it breaks in half, it's a big lighter. You go buy another one, and it's like you're not crying over some, And so,
dude, especially like if you're in the bar gig scene, which we've all done.
Yeah.
I don't want to take my Memphis 335 down to Buckhead to play it till 3 in the morning.
I'm not going to see you whipping your Fano out to go play.
No.
So, and that's here again. So what do you take? You take a Pro Junior, a Blues Junior, and then you take your $500 junker parts, whatever, and it'll still do the job, And so to me, it's like, well. There again, that's the kind of thing with Fender. There is a stigma about this. Well, why would I spend $5,000 for a Strat when I can, So that maybe in itself is inherently the biggest problem with most of us, is that we think in the back of our mind, well, we don't need to spend that kind of money on a Fender because I can put one together, I can buy a neck, I can swap one.
Right. That's an interesting thing. Like for $7,000, I'm going back to thinking about that custom shop telly that I saw. In the Gibson video, I talked about the 59 custom shop Les Pauls, which are in the $7,000 range. And when I see one of those, I go, man, that's expensive, but I mean, all right. when I saw that telly, I was like, geez, man, $7,000 for a telly. And you're right,
Well,
it
yeah.
is that thing. Like, it's essentially, you know, Brad Paisley calls it a cutting board with a neck on it.
Right.
You know, which essentially it is.
Yeah, because I mean, and here I'm a diehard vintage guy. Okay.
Yeah.
And even me, I'll walk in and see a '50s telly, and from $15,000 to 50 now, and I go, man, I love these guitars. I've owned hundreds of these guitars before they were that expensive. They're awesome. But if I had 15 to 50 grand, would I ever dump that kind of money into one now? I really don't think I would, even if I had the money. You know?
Unless you knew you were going to make
right, and then to me, then that, you know, that kind of negates a lot of the reason to have that guitar, because you want to play it, you want to have fun with it, you want to show it off. And then it becomes this thing, well, I can't. It's an investment piece. It sits in the vault, and you know. And the only thing I can say is, well, I have an original, great, but
If you don't play it, what's the point? To me, anyways.
Right. So, I think that's kind of a stigma. You know, it's like, well, there is a price point where you go, well, man, it is really just a neck and a body, and the rest of it is like it's a vibe.
Yeah.
You know. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what Fender kind of does in the future, just to see if whether maybe they will go back. You know, that maybe this whole Gibson thing will really help some other companies. But hey, you know what? We're kind of along a parallel line there.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to kind of restructure this and redo it. You know, and so it'll be interesting to see. But I think for me though, if I had to pick one, I would. Japanese Fenders. I mean, I'll probably get people to be like, "Oh, you're an idiot," but I think they're phenomenal guitars. And if you know anything about Japanese replicas, most of them were excellent. And so they focused in on the important things that I would focus in on. So
I think that does it for today's Fender discussion. I'd like to thank Dave Honorato, Rhett Shull. They have Rhett has a channel.
Link in the description.
And we're getting Dave a channel here.
I got a channel. I'm on Facebook right now, and I want to thank everybody who actually did try to friend me on Facebook. I got like 50 or 60 guys that tried to friend me, and unfortunately, I'm so busy I don't have really any time to answer you guys. But I
keep bothering him.
And I'll probably have a channel there shortly. So
and if you're in the Atlanta area, Dojo Guitar Repair. Dude.
Yeah.
Dave's the man.
He's the man. So I think we established if you want a Fender, buy a Squire.